Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I moved there when I was in third grade. My dad worked at Michigan Tech University, and he was a professor there. That's how we ended up there. Started in Chicago and then spent some time in Madison, Wisconsin where my dad got his PhD. But he got a job at Michigan Tech University, and I consider Houghton my hometown. I'm very passionate. I'm very fond of Houghton. I'm on the High School Alumni Association and get up there often. My dad lives up there, and so I do get up there often. And when I was in college, I would go home for summers, and I got a job working at the university. It's the biggest employer in the area. There were good jobs there, certainly for kids. But a friend in high school had been working summers there and gotten a job working in the dormitories, the residence halls, if you will. They're always doing things in the residence halls. There were a lot of camps in the summertime, getting the rooms ready for the upcoming year. Students they would paint the rooms every year, and they would clean the carpets, and we would do all those things and clean the carpets between visits with the kids who were there for hockey camp or football camp or women in engineering or whatever it was. We were there. We were doing things. After my senior year in high school, I remember I graduated on May 31st, and June 1st I started at what was co-ed hall at Michigan Tech University. And Monday morning, bright and early, and I got the job from a friend. I guess it was maybe not my first introduction to getting a job through contacts. I had another job, and actually all my jobs were through some sort of contact, but that's neither here nor there right now. But my friend, Rich Dunnebeck, we grew up together. He lived just down the road from me. He worked there the summer before, and he introduced me to Andre Bonner, who led the crew, was in charge of maintenance and custodial at co-ed hall, and got a job, filled out the paperwork, got a job. And it was fun. Rich and I, like I said, we went to school together all the way through grade school, high school, played sports together, and got to work together and clean carpets. And then another friend of ours got a job there, Neil Lowney, who played football with us. And we just had a lot of fun. It was a lot of laughs. We would have lunch down in the resident hall cafeteria occasionally, or we'd pack our lunch, or, it was just a lot of fun. Listening to music and so on and so forth. And it was a good time. Between my sophomore and junior year of college, going back and working, and they couldn't get us there soon enough because there was lots to do. And it always seemed like I would finish up with college at Beloit, Wisconsin, Beloit College in Beloit, Wisconsin. I would race home, and the next day I would start work. But between my sophomore and junior year, I think I can't exactly remember the year, there was somebody else that showed up. There were a lot of people working there, and many of them were students who were at Michigan Tech who decided they were going to stick around for the summer for whatever reason. But this other guy was another local person, and his name was Kenny Cluthier. And Kenny went to it was somewhat of a rival high school. I didn't know Kenny, but I knew of Kenny. Kenny broke our hearts in football. He was a great football player. He broke our hearts in basketball. He was a great basketball player. He was great at track. I mean, Kenny, he played for another high school. Oh my gosh, it's Kenny. Oh my God, what's Kenny doing here? And what ended up happening was, instead of me working with Rich Dunnebeck or working with Neil Lowney, I was assigned to work with Kenny for the whole summer. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be horrible. I don't want to work with Kenny. I mean, I didn't say any of this, and it's a job. I wasn't going to quit. My dad would have killed me. You work, you make money, you go to college. It's just that's what you do. You can't just sit home all day, and it's kind of the mindset we had, and still have. Right? It's just we're a working family. So I got to suck it up and work with Kenny, and it didn't take long, but I realized that Kenny is a really neat guy. Was a neat guy, is a neat guy. We've lost touch, but we had a lot in common. Obviously, he played football, high school football, and played basketball, and we talked about those things and compared notes. And I went off to college to play football, and he went off to college to play basketball, and so we had that in common. And so there was those things we had in common, things to talk about. And you know what? In Houghton, Michigan, there's only two radio stations, so it's like you want like one or the other, and it's all the same music. It wasn't a country station; it was just a station that played country during a particular hour. Um, and so life was different, it was simple, and we had lots in common. And one of the other things I really ended up liking about Kenny is he had a great sense of humor. I remember once something happened and I said, oh, well, you can't have everything, and Kenny just chimed in and he just said, and where would you put it all? Which I just thought was totally hilarious. In this moment it's probably not, but we had I really liked Kenny. I didn't start out liking Kenny because I didn't know Kenny. And once I got the opportunity to get to know Kenny, I really started to like him. And I think there's a lesson in that. I recently read a study, and what they have found is that um, there's a there's a portion of our brain which activates, essentially rewards us when we harm those people that are not part of our peer group or part of our family or part of our community, part of our race, part of our religion. Um, didn't go to the high school we went to. Now Kenny didn't go to the rival high school, but it was there weren't many high schools in the area. They were all small high schools, and you faced off against all of them in pretty much every sport. Name a sport, and you played it. He went to Lakeland in high school. You know, we played football against them. We played basketball. Their hockey team played our hockey team. Obviously they had, well, I shouldn't say obviously, they had a track team. It was a rival school. You didn't know those kids. Um, it wasn't like today where you get a chance to meet people and Facebook and things like that. You just didn't know a lot. It's just, to me, he was Kenny. Oh my gosh, he broke our hearts. He's the star over there. Um, but what they find is that there's a portion of our brain it's a reward mechanism in our brain that's activated when we when I say harm, I don't mean physical harm necessarily. Obviously that plays into it or can play into it. But we get rewarded for hating the people the hating the people that are strangers to us. And this is just something that they're really starting to explore. And I'm going to kind of keep an eye on it because, um, you know, uh, well, it's troubling, but I mean, it's ingrained in us. I mean, if you stop and you think, we grew up, not grew up, we developed in tribes, clans, or whatever you want to call it, of about 150, and there's something to that number I won't get into today. Um, and if you saw a stranger, it wasn't a good thing. So we we developed with this almost a defense mechanism that you needed to have a hatred or certainly a defense against people that weren't part of your tribe or part of your clan. And so how they've what they did to sort of look at this is they had 35 college students. It's always college students. They pick on college students, and they brought them into the social science lab to play a game. Um, and essentially, it was done online, so they really didn't know who the other person was. And some of the group played against. Oh, you're playing against somebody else here on campus. You're playing against somebody here at um, Ohio State. And then the other group said, well, you're playing against somebody at Michigan. And for those who don't know, Ohio State and Michigan have a huge rivalry. It's a lot of fun. Sometimes it goes over the top, but there's a huge rivalry there. And what they found is that the students that felt that, and I'm just making up that it was Ohio State, Michigan, because I do live in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm a Michigan fan, and many people understand that rivalry. Um, but what they found is that the students the Ohio State students that felt that they were playing this game against Michigan students played it very, very aggressively. And when they started to look at the brain scans of these people, they realized that what was happening was linked to a reward portion in the brain. In other words, by playing aggressive against these nasty Michigan people, they got rewarded for it. And so, and more or less, they got a kick out of being more aggressive to their out of group uh, competitors. And it starts to explain a lot, if you will, about what's happening, well, not just in the world, but in communities. You see elections, and you see signs going up across, vote yes, vote no, on contentious issues of people who are neighbors, and you wonder, what it does. And it should be no wonder to us that there are issues in the Middle East or different parts of the world for people who've had these how do I want to put it, they don't even know these people, and it's this long-standing hatred, of rival factions, or rival countries, or rival religions. And you know what, as I've kind of indicated early on in this, the solution to this is just getting to know people, just like I got to know Kenny Cluthier. And I realize it's not as easy as that. It's not as easy as, here's a bucket of paint, Frank and Kenny go paint a wall together. Um, but I think we need to remind ourselves that everybody out there is really like us. Everybody loves their kids like I love my kids. Everybody loves their mom and dad like I love my mom and dad. Okay, there's exceptions, but for the most part, we have this affinity towards our families, and that's something we have in common. So if you want to win over strangers, um, if you want to treat strangers better, stop and look to see what are the things that you might have in common with them. That's the key. Because as soon as you start finding you have something in common with people, as I pointed out with my experience with Kenny Cluthier, um, those those hatreds start to come down. You start to develop a kinship, if you will. It's like, yeah, Kenny and I, we went to different high schools, but we had a lot in common. We had humor in common. We had music in common. We had sports in common. Um, a shared experience, or not a shared experience, but a similar experience playing college sports, and that helped us become friends. Certainly, while we were working there, we've lost touch. So I won't conflate it more than it is, but it was a much better experience working with him once I realized we had those things in common. So if you want better relationships with people you don't know, the first step, the easiest step, is just to figure out what are the simple things you have in common. And I'm willing to bet that in 10 minutes, you could find a dozen different things that you have in common. Forget the things you don't have in common. Focus on the things you do have in common and start from there.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.